August 7, 1942. The Pacific is boiling with heat and war. At Rabaul headquarters, Admiral Isaruku Yamamoto receives a coded report from his air commanders over the Solomon Islands. His officers whisper, the room thick with cigarette smoke and the faint vibration of radio static. The message is simple, but its meaning is heavy. American fighters of an unfamiliar design have entered the skies above Guadalcanal. Yamamoto's eyes narrow. He has studied American industry. He has warned Tokyo about its steel rivers and assembly lines, yet he did not expect this machine. It is not another Wildcat or clumsy P-40. This one is different. Twin engines, long range, brutal speed. For the first time, the Japanese naval staff feels the steel teeth of a changing war bite into their plans. A new predator has arrived in the Pacific. The image is unforgettable. A silver aircraft slices down through a wall of tropical cloud, sunlight flashing across its twin booms like a pair of blades. Its props roar not with the strained growl of single-engine fighters, but with a double-throated snarl, deep and metallic, like a power saw biting into iron. Japanese lookouts on the ground squint upward, confused. In the air, Zero pilots crane their necks and see the impossible, an American fighter that climbs like a bomber and dives like a hawk. The P-38 Lightning moves with a mechanical certainty, twin tails cutting against the blue, and for the first time, Japanese aviators realize they are facing an opponent that cannot be outturned by instinct alone. The battlefield sky itself feels different now, as if the physics of the air have been rewritten. Why does Guadalcanal matter? The answer is in numbers, cold and unforgiving. Henderson Field, carved out of jungle mud, is more than a patch of runway. It is a lever. From this single strip of land, American forces can launch 40 fighters in rotation. Each fighter can protect convoys. Each convoy carries 500 tons of food, ammunition, or fuel. A month's supplies equals survival for tens of thousands of men. Subtract the airfield, and the Marines starve. Keep the airfield, and Tokyo's barges are sunk before they reach the shore. War in the Pacific is measured not in abstract glory, but in tonnage delivered and tonnage denied. In a theater where every gallon of fuel must cross thousands of miles of ocean, arithmetic is destiny. American planners knew it. Japanese planners feared it. To Tokyo, Guadalcanal was a knife at the throat of their southward advance, a base that could cut supply lines to New Guinea and beyond. That is why the Japanese sent wave after wave of bombers and fighters to pound the strip. And that is why when the P-38 appeared, it was more than just another aircraft. It was a multiplier. Its long range meant it could escort bombers far over Japanese territory or loiter over shipping lanes for hours. Its speed meant it could choose when to fight and when to vanish. The math was merciless. A Zero carried just over 2 hours of fuel in combat. A P-38 with drop tanks could patrol for twice that. Each patrol widened the zone where Japanese ships were no longer safe. Numbers stacked on numbers. An American transport convoy of 6 ships might bring 20,000 tons of cargo in a single trip. If Japanese aircraft got through, even one well-placed torpedo could erase 5,000 tons instantly. But if P-38s blocked the attack, the convoy lived, the supplies unloaded, and the front line held. Every extra crate of ammunition, every gallon of gasoline landed on Guadalcanal meant another day the Marines could fire, move, and breathe. Logistics was not background, it was the war itself. Yamamoto understood that arithmetic better than most. In 1941, he had warned the Prime Minister, In the first 6 to 12 months of a war with the United States and Britain, I will run wild and win victory after victory. But then, if the war continues after that, I have no expectation of success. Now, only 9 months after Pearl Harbor, his own warning was taking form in the sky above Guadalcanal. The P-38 was the embodiment of American endurance. Engines, guns, range, and industry fused into a machine designed not just to win duels, but to grind down an empire through sustained pressure. For Japanese pilots, trained for short-range dogfights where maneuver was everything, the Lightning was a nightmare. It fought by different rules. Its twin-turbo superchargers meant it could climb into thin air where Zeros gasped for oxygen. Its heavy cannon meant a single burst could dismember a bomber. To the men who had built their confidence on the myth of Japanese air invincibility, the sight of that twin-boomed silhouette above the clouds was not just intimidating, it was a glimpse of the industrial storm waiting behind it. The Pacific was vast, and distances broke weaker machines. Guadalcanal proved it. To protect one island required aircraft that could fly farther, hit harder, and survive longer than anything the Japanese had prepared for. The Americans had built just such a machine. The Japanese had gambled on agility and range at the cost of armor and firepower. The P-38 revealed the flaw in that equation with brutal clarity. And so, as August turned into September and the skies above the Solomons grew hotter, the terror of Japanese pilots was not superstition, it was math carried on wings of steel. The months before Guadalcanal were not just battles in the jungle. They were battles on blueprints, assembly lines, and cipher machines. In dim rooms in Pearl Harbor, U.S. Navy codebreakers bent over scraps of intercepted Japanese transmissions. Each string of digits, each kanji character decrypted was another piece of the Pacific chessboard revealed. By July 1942, they had mapped Japanese convoy routes, predicted reinforcements, and even cracked the movement of senior officers. A classified Navy memorandum dated July 30 put it bluntly, "Enemy intends to reinforce Guadalcanal by sea within 1 week. Air cover priority required." That sentence triggered a ripple effect stretching from California factories to the cockpits of the South Pacific. Thousands of miles away, in Burbank, California, Lockheed's factory floor thundered with the rhythm of industry. The plant ran 3 shifts, day and night, its windows blacked out to prevent enemy reconnaissance. Rows of aluminum sheets gleamed under fluorescent lights. Women riveters with bandanas tied tight hammered fuselage panels into place, sparks snapping off the floor. Overhead cranes moved wings as if they were slabs of steel on a shipyard dock. By late 1942, Lockheed was rolling out nearly 2 P-38s per day, each one destined to leapfrog across the Pacific, California to Hawaii, Hawaii to New Caledonia, and then into the heat of combat. Every step of preparation carried technical improvisation. The Pacific was too wide for most fighters. Even the formidable P-47 Thunderbolt lacked the range. Engineers modified the Lightning with drop tanks, external fuel cylinders that doubled its legs. Each tank carried about 165 gallons, extending the fighter's patrol radius by hundreds of miles. On paper, this seemed like a simple solution. In reality, pilots called it a lifeline. With tanks fitted, they could escort bombers deep into enemy territory or intercept Japanese aircraft long before they reached American convoys. The U.S. military was not just adapting, it was engineering its way into a new kind of warfare where endurance was a weapon. Now the camera shifts. A hangar door slides open on a humid morning at Henderson Field. Inside stands the P-38 Lightning. Its shape is alien, almost unsettling. Instead of a single fuselage, it wears twin booms joined by a central pod. Its tricycle landing gear gives it a stance more like a futuristic machine than a 1940s aircraft. Each side houses an Allison V1710 engine, water-cooled, turbo-supercharged, capable of producing more than 1,400 horsepower. Together, they give the Lightning a top speed of nearly 414 miles per hour at altitude, faster than almost any Japanese plane it faced in 1942. Armament is concentrated in the nose, a 20mm Hispano cannon and 4.50 caliber Browning machine guns. Unlike wing-mounted guns, these converge automatically. No deflection, no guessing ranges, just a cone of fire that could shred a bomber from 600 yards out. U.S. pilots called it firing a buzzsaw through the sky. Japanese pilots would soon learn that a single half-second burst could dismember a Zero's fragile airframe. Production figures underlined the industrial tide. Between 1941 and 1945, Lockheed built 10,038 P-38s. By the end of 1942, squadrons of them were already in the South Pacific. Each carried oxygen systems for high-altitude combat, armored glass windshields, and radio sets that linked pilots directly to ground controllers using radar vectors. It was not just a fighter, it was a flying node in a growing American network of intelligence and firepower. Then came the first contact. October 27, 1942, near Guadalcanal. A formation of Japanese A-6M Zeros rose from Rabaul, aiming to intercept U.S. bombers moving toward enemy shipping. Above them, unseen in the glare, a flight of 4 P-38s cruised at 25,000 feet. The Lightning's turbochargers sang with a faint metallic whine, maintaining power in thin air where the Zero's engine faltered. Radar operators from Henderson Field had vectored them onto the Japanese formation. At 1100 hours, the trap closed. P-38 leader Captain Thomas Lanfear spotted glimpses of sunlight on enemy canopies below. He rocked his wings, gave the signal, and nosed over. The Lightnings fell like blades, twin contrails streaking downward. Japanese pilots looked up in confusion. The Americans were diving from an altitude Zeros could not match. A Zero tried to pull up into the attack, but the Lightning screamed past at over 400 miles per hour, guns flashing. The burst caught its wing root. Flames gushed from the fuel tank, the Zero spiraling down in a trail of black smoke. The dogfight unfolded with brutal physics. Zeros tried to turn inside the Americans, banking hard in tight circles. But the P-38s didn't play that game. They climbed, they dove. They slashed through the formation in boom and zoom strikes. Each pass was a hammer blow, not a dance. Pilots reported the unnerving sight of Japanese rounds ricocheting off armored cockpits, sparks bouncing like flint on steel. In a diary entry later recovered from a downed Japanese officer, dated November 1942, the words captured the fear. "The twin-tail plane is impossible. It dives too fast, we cannot chase it. If we climb, it climbs higher. It is like trying to catch the wind with bare hands." By the end of the skirmish, 2 Zeros were destroyed, 1 damaged, and all P-38s returned to base. It was not the numbers that mattered that day. It was the realization. Japanese pilots who had once believed in the untouchable maneuverability of the Zero now faced a machine that obeyed different physics. The Lightning had written its name across the sky in speed, range, and fire. The Japanese did not surrender the skies easily. In the months after the first P-38 encounters, their pilots began studying this new machine, searching for weaknesses. Squadron leaders issued new orders. Avoid climbing duels, avoid long chases, strike from above in mass formations. Zero pilots trained to launch shallow dives, fire in quick bursts, and then scatter before the Lightning's counterattack. At Rabaul, briefings were filled with chalkboard diagrams showing how to swarm the twin-tail fighter from multiple angles. The strategy was simple: overwhelm the American with numbers before his heavy guns could speak. But the Americans adapted faster. Radar stations at Henderson Field began to vector Lightning squadrons with precision. Instead of waiting to be attacked, P-38 set ambushes. A Japanese raid of 15 bombers and 10 escorts would find itself intercepted by only 8 Lightnings, yet the fight unfolded on American terms. Pilots like Captain Rex Barber learned to climb high, stay invisible in the sun glare, then dive straight through bomber formations before Japanese escorts could react. They did not turn with the Zero. They did not stall in prolonged duels. Each P-38 acted like a piston in an engine, striking hard and cycling out, then returning for another blow. Japanese countermeasures could not overcome the simple physics of the Lightning's speed and endurance. A Zero could fight brilliantly for 20 minutes, but fuel gauges drained quickly. At 100 miles from base, Japanese pilots had to break off or risk ditching at sea. The P-38, with its drop tanks, could keep patrolling, keep hunting. The imbalance widened with each mission. Yet superiority on paper never erased the human toll. For American pilots, the P-38 was both a gift and a burden. Missions stretched to 6 or even 7 hours. Cockpits became ovens in the tropical sun, temperatures climbing above 120 degrees. Sweat-soaked flight suits, salt-stung eyes, and the endless vibration of twin engines left fingers numb. Oxygen systems hissed at high altitude, but if one valve froze, the pilot's breath could turn into frost on the inside of the canopy. One after-action report described a Lightning returning to base with the pilot barely conscious, his mask clogged with ice, his hands too stiff to work the throttle. Engines, too, carried their limits. The Allison V-1710s demanded careful handling, pushed them too hard in a climb, and temperatures spiked into the red. On tropical strips where maintenance crews struggled with heat, mud, and spare part shortages, mechanics worked through the nights to keep squadrons operational. A single turbocharger failure could cripple performance at altitude. Pilots knew it. Every time they rammed the throttle forward to chase a Zero, they gambled on machinery holding together. Japanese pilots shared the strain in different form. The Zero was nimble but fragile. It lacked armor and self-sealing fuel tanks. Even a glancing burst from a P-38's guns could ignite it. Survivors described the horror of seeing wingmen vanish in fireballs, the air filled with the stench of burning fuel and scorched aluminum. Yet the fear was not just physical, it was psychological. Pilots spoke of the twin-tailed demon as if it were a mechanical predator, impossible to evade for long. But the Lightning was not invincible. March 2nd to 4th, 1943, the Battle of the Bismarck Sea proved the cost of long-range operations. American bombers, escorted by P-38s, attacked a major Japanese convoy attempting to reinforce Lae, New Guinea. The Lightnings performed brilliantly at first, slicing into Japanese fighter cover, shooting down multiple bombers. But as the battle stretched on, flak erupted from below. Japanese destroyers filled the sky with black puffs of steel fragments. In one wave, several P-38s dove to strafe, their guns chewing through decks, but anti-aircraft bursts tore into their formation. One Lightning, hit in the wing root, spiraled down in flames, its wreckage vanishing into the sea. Another limped back, trailing smoke, the pilot dead before wheels touched the strip. The official U.S. Army Air Force's communiqué celebrated the victory. 8 Japanese transports and 4 destroyers sunk, thousands of enemy troops lost at sea. But in squadron logs, the cost was etched in stark lines. 3 Lightnings failed to return. Cause: enemy fire. For pilots who had begun to believe the Lightning untouchable, it was a reminder written in blood that no machine could escape war's arithmetic forever. Still, the message to both sides was undeniable. The P-38 had flaws, yes, heat, mechanical strain, the dangers of low-level flak, but it was here to stay. For every Lightning lost, another rolled out of Burbank's assembly lines, polished and ready. For every pilot killed, new volunteers trained, eager to sit in the cockpit of America's most advanced long-range fighter. Japanese commanders saw it clearly. They were not fighting one squadron or even one airfield. They were fighting the industrial output of a continent. The battle for the skies was no longer a contest of skill alone. It was pressure, sustained and grinding, where technology, endurance, and production hammered away like pistons until something broke. And in the Pacific of 1943, it was the Japanese side that felt the gears beginning to seize up. War forced both man and machine to evolve. By mid-1943, every squadron flying the Lightning had a list of fixes scrawled in grease pencil on hangar walls. Cockpit frost plagued high-altitude missions, so ground crews rigged crude heating lines into the canopy seals. Engines overheated on long climbs, so pilots learned to feather propellers, nursing temperatures with precise throttle taps. Maintenance teams scavenged wrecked Japanese planes for scrap metal, melting down fragments to patch bullet holes in Lightning fuselages. This was improvisation at its rawest, field engineering under palm trees, with coconut husks scattered beside toolkits. Tactics shifted too. Instead of flying as lone predators, P-38 squadrons coordinated into pairs and then into flights of 4, each wingman protecting the other's blind spot. Pilots carried notebooks with quick sketch diagrams of climbing ambushes and rolling scissors, maneuvers designed specifically to exploit the Lightning's dive speed. Intelligence units at Henderson and Port Moresby fed them updated data. Convoy sailing times, bomber formations, even estimated altitudes of incoming raids. With radios and radar guiding them, P-38 pilots became hunters with advance warning. By the end of 1943, it was no longer the Japanese dictating the terms of combat. The ultimate test came on April 18, 1943. Operation Vengeance. Codebreakers at Pearl had intercepted Yamamoto's inspection tour schedule. The commander-in-chief of the Imperial Japanese Navy would be flying in a Betty bomber from Rabaul to Bougainville. The order from Washington was direct: intercept and destroy. Only one aircraft could carry out the mission, the P-38. No other fighter had the range to fly the 400-mile approach at treetop height, strike, and then return. 18 Lightnings lifted off from Guadalcanal before dawn. Each carried drop tanks and stripped gear for maximum endurance. Engines thundered in unison, a deep mechanical growl that shook the palms along the runway. The plan was precise: fly at wave-top height to evade radar, climb only at the last moment, and spring the trap on Yamamoto's flight. Pilots described the hours over open water as endless silence, broken only by the droning of propellers and the smell of fuel seeping from tanks. One recalled, "Every minute I expected to see a Japanese patrol sweep down on us, but the sky stayed empty. It was like flying inside a sealed clock, waiting for the second hand to strike." At 9:34 hours, lookouts spotted the glint of twin-engine Betty bombers approaching Bougainville, escorted by Zero fighters. Captain Thomas Lanfear and Lieutenant Rex Barber pushed throttles forward. The P-38s surged upward from the sea's surface like arrows loosed from a bow. Within seconds, cannon and machine guns roared. Yamamoto's bomber tried to bank, but the Lightning's burst tore into its wing and engines. Witnesses saw the aircraft roll, smoke trailing, before it smashed into the jungle canopy in a fireball. Japan's most revered admiral was dead before he could reach the ground. The intercept stunned the Japanese command. They knew at once that their codes had been broken, that the Americans could reach farther than expected, and that even their highest leadership was not safe. For the men who had once believed the Zero ruled the Pacific skies, the message was clear: the Lightning had shattered that illusion. After Yamamoto's death, Japanese morale suffered a wound no propaganda could fully cover. Pilots still fought bravely, but whispers of the twin-tailed devil spread across airfields from Rabaul to Truk. The psychological weight was heavy. If their greatest strategist could be killed mid-air, what chance did ordinary pilots have? Hard numbers completed the verdict. By the end of World War II, the P-38 had flown over 130,000 sorties in the Pacific Theater. USAAF Statistical Digest, 1946. It destroyed more than 1,800 Japanese aircraft and carried out countless long-range missions from New Guinea to the Philippines. America's top two aces, Richard Bong with 40 kills and Thomas Maguire with 38, both flew Lightnings. Each statistic told the same story, a machine built not only to match the Zero, but to eclipse it. And yet the tale was never just about numbers. It was about endurance. Pilots flying until eyes burned, engines pushed until bolts rattled, and ground crews patching holes until their hands blistered. It was about adaptation under pressure, where improvisation at the front matched industrial might at the rear. The P-38 was not flawless. It was a compromise of engineering, a machine that demanded skill and punished mistakes. But in the crucible of the Pacific, it proved exactly what was needed, a fighter that could reach farther, hit harder, and last longer than its opponent. When the war ended in 1945, Japanese veterans admitted the truth in debriefings and memoirs. One former Zero fighter wrote, "We feared the Lightning most. It was fast at every height. It had heavy guns. If it chose to fight, you could not escape." His words echoed the verdict of history. The Pacific skies had been transformed by steel, fuel, and code breaking. And in that transformation, one aircraft stood at the center, the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. The Lightning did not just contest the skies, it rewired the limits of air combat, and in doing so, rewrote the course of a war.